Hello and welcome to Deception Diaries. I saw a Mercedes blocking my side of the garage, but I didn't pay much attention to it. I just stopped by home to get my phone. It's amazing how people have become so dependent on their phones these days. I had notes I made for the 10 o'clock meeting and wanted to make sure I was ready. Under normal circumstances, I would never have been home at 9:50. On the other hand, my wife is a stay-at-home mom with a child. I sent her a message to see if she was busy, and she replied that she was at the library. She couldn't hand me the phone, so I made the 15-minute trip back home. I was wondering whose Benz it was. When I entered through the front door, since Scene was at the library, there shouldn't have been any guests. I guess I'm a fool because when I went to my bedroom to get my cell phone, I saw my wife in bed with another man in the guest room. I was paralyzed for a moment, but I calmed down and quietly took out my phone with the of taking a picture for the divorce, but I changed my mind because rage overcame me. I grabbed the guy by the hair and pulled him away from my unfaithful wife. I was shouting obscenities as I kicked him to the floor, and I spat at my wife and left the room. I was deaf to her screams, begging me to stop, pleading with me to wait, but I didn't hear anything. The Mercedes was blinking in my driveway when I opened the trunk. I quickly looked to see if I had something suitable and chose a heavy metal jack. That's enough, I told myself, and began smashing all the windows, headlights, taillights, and all the doors of the offender's car. Then, calmly, I returned to the trunk, threw the tool inside, and wiped the sweat from my forehead. At that moment, my neighbor, Jaider, came out to see what was happening. I waved to him as I walked away from my driveway, ignoring my wife screaming at me to stop and let her explain everything. We had been married for 2 years, but we had been dating throughout college. Our son, Sebastian Jr., was 13 months old, and suddenly, I realized I would be paying alimony forever. I couldn't believe my world was falling apart, and then the phone rang. I pulled into my office parking lot and organized my thoughts for the meeting. I met with the owners and my immediate supervisor about the idea of remote work for employees. This would allow the company to save thousands of dollars in rent every year, but they were against it because they were old and lacked foresight. I was going to change their minds. I ignored calls from my wife and, surprisingly, from her sister, and sent notes to myself via email. I left my phone on the seat and went to make my presentation. I sat in my corner in the office and sighed with relief. My neighbor, Bet, peeked in and asked, "How did it go?" I smiled. The meeting went great. I think we'll be working remotely by Christmas and my life down the drain. What happened? Bet asked. I went home and saw my wife sleeping with some idiot. My marriage is over. I thought I saw a fleeting smile on her lips. God, you're harsh. Yeah, that too, I replied. The landline phone rang, and I saw it was my wife. I thought she was going to keep bothering me, so I answered, "Please, don't bother me at work, Scene, no more, dear. You made a mistake." "Yes, I made a mistake when I married you, Scene," I said, and hung up the phone with a gesture. I furrowed my brow. No, for God's sake, listen to me. It wasn't me at home. I was at the library. I teed with Scarlett. I laughed. Why would Scarlett use our house? Esteve works from home. Esteve had been her husband for 6 months. Could it be true? Could it have been Scarlett and not Scene? I lowered my head and said, "Try it, prove it was Scarlett." I replayed the entire scene in my head, tried to imagine every image, every nuance I could remember, but nothing helped. How can I do that? Darling, please, you have to believe me. I love you. Come on, don't give up on us. Did you abandon us when you opened your legs? I hit the phone on its base. Are you okay? Bet asked. It says it was her sister, Bet. I laughed. You've seen them, right? I nodded. So, what's the problem? I looked at her and said, "They're twins." The rest of the day, I felt like a zombie. I wasn't sure if I should go back home, look for a hotel, or what to do, but I expected an ambush upon my return. Sean and her sister were so close to their mother that I imagined all three of them would be there to confront me. I entered my garage at the usual time and saw that Scarlett and Berea were already there. Berea was my mother-in-law and could pass for a triplet with her daughters, except for the additional 20 years of experience reflected in her face. She was an exact copy of them. I approached my ambush, and when they all started talking at the same time, I raised my hand to stop them. "Quiet, all of you." I approached the playpen of little Bas and picked him up. "How are you, baby?" I asked, as if he could respond. I tickled him, and his laughter couldn't help but bring a smile to my face. I was worried about losing him after the divorce and if I would find someone to replace me. He was so young. Would they ever think of me as his dad, or would they see my replacement as his father? It was breaking my heart. A tear rolled down my cheek as I sat on the couch. Little Bas squirmed and slid down my legs to crawl away quickly. The three women looked at me expectantly, and each of them seemed like ready to strike Viper. "All right," I said. "Where's Esteve?" "Why does Esteve have to be here?" Scarlett asked. I knew it was Scarlett because she had a mole on the back of her hand. I didn't notice her hand this morning. That would be too easy. I was a fool to leave without letting her explain. How she begged me. There would have been no problem if I had just stayed. "Well, if it was you who slept with this man in my guest room, he doesn't deserve the right to know." "I won't tell Esteve. I hoped you'd keep this between us." "It's me, Rose." I laughed. "Do you expect me to believe it was you and not Sean?" "But I won't tell Esteve." "I don't believe you." Bas intervened. "Come on, let's not ruin marriages over this." "Oh, she's being a bit cheeky, Bertie. Let me tell you what's happening. My marriage is ruined, and the only thing that can fix it is Scarlett confessing to Esteve about her infidelity." The women gasped and Sean began to sob. "Esteve is too good," Bas said, defending her daughters. "Wait a moment," I said. "I need to change. I'll be back in a minute." When I reached my bedroom, I called my father-in-law. "Dale, hey. Are you coming?" "What happened?" "Dale, you need to come to my house right away. I've got a lot of trouble here and I need your help." "What's going on? Is everything okay?" "Yes, just come here as soon as possible." I ended the conversation and decided to buy some time. I took a quick shower and dressed in comfortable shorts and a sleeveless shirt. It would have been about 10 minutes by now. So, Dale should be here soon. I headed downstairs. I looked at the three women who were whispering in conspiracy and grabbed a couple of beer bottles from the fridge. Just in time, Dale walked in without knocking, as was usual for him. I served him a beer and the ladies resumed their conversation. Sean started it. "Why did you call my father? He shouldn't get involved in this." "Nonsense," he grumbled. "You're lucky I only reached Esteve's voicemail." Scarlett opened her mouth. "I never called Esteve. I never liked that guy and didn't want to see him." "What's going on, Vas?" Dale asked. "Well, today I found my wife sleeping with a man in my bed and they're trying to convince me that it was Scarlett." "No," she screamed. I nodded and continued as he looked at the women. "The problem is that Scarlett refuses to tell Esteve. She can save my marriage by destroying hers, but she doesn't want to do it. This tells me it wasn't her but Sean." "I agree," he said. He looked at me and asked, "And what's my wife's opinion?" I furrowed my brow. Beretti seems inclined not to tell Esteve and just move on. She seems to think that her daughters should be allowed to have affairs without consequences. Dale said, "If I even think you knew something about it or see you supporting it in any way, I'll kick you out. Bring Esteve here. He should know his wife is being unfaithful and he can decide if he wants to stay married to her." A pleading look appeared on Scene's face, who turned to her sister Scarlett. She looked at me and she stood up, shook her head and said, "I'm so sorry. I refuse to tell my husband it was me. I'll take the risk." "You," Scene yelled. "You're going to ruin my marriage for a chance to save yours. Get out of my house, and you better understand that I'll tell Esteve everything." Scarlett laughed. "Do you think he'll believe you? You'll do anything to try to save your marriage, even lie to ruin mine." Beretti stood up and said, "Girls, stop it. The only thing that will save your marriages is the truth." Scarlett smiled and walked out the door. "I didn't expect such an act," I said. Dale looked at me curiously. "She interprets it as she said," he said against her. "If both blame each other, no one will know for sure who it was. She decided that both Esteve and I would think our wives might have done it. But without clear evidence, there's a chance we won't divorce. I even encouraged her by allowing her to use my house if Scene doesn't see a problem with her sister betraying her husband. How can I believe she's not betraying herself? After all, they're twins." Scene didn't shout and ran to our bedroom. I knew their identity didn't mean both were traitors, but I thought it was a good way to hurt her. Beretti turned to go after Scene. "But Dale, you're one head if you support either of them in this. I'll assume you support them and you'll end up on the street. Understood?" She nodded timidly and hugged Dale. I picked up Bas from his high chair and kissed him, hoping that things would somehow resolve. I fed Bas and placed him in the playpen while I tried to figure out what to do. Scene didn't come down, and I assumed she was doing the same as me. I sat with my eyes closed, going over and over in my memory the images of the room at that moment, and I couldn't remember anything that proved it was Scarlett and not Scene. I was interrupted in my thoughts by the ringing of my mobile phone. "Hello, Bet, how are you?" "Nothing. No progress or regression. I'm desperately trying to figure out how I can find out for sure which one of the two it was, but I'm stuck in uncertainty. I'm really sorry, Bas. You don't deserve this. If you need anything, I'll be there right away." "Alright, Bet. Thank you. See you in the morning." I ended the call and thought about how good it was that Bet cared about me. We've been friends since we started working on the same day 2 years ago. Her workspace was next to mine, and since the office was open, our computers faced each other, and we looked at each other almost all day. She was a pretty girl, a bit plumper than Scene, but she had her charm and often hinted at things and used ambiguous expressions during the day. If Scene was tall and slender, Bet was petite and curvy, with long red hair that she constantly brushed aside during the day. "Vas," Scene said from the stairs. "Yes, I swear on our son's life. It was Scarlett. You have to believe me. Believe in my love for you." "How? How can I believe you if it wasn't you? Why did you let your sister do this in our house? You messed up, Scene. I don't see a way out of this for us." She was sitting on the stairs and sobbing. I knew I had to do something for sure, so I called Esteve. "Hello, Vas. Hi, Steve. Did Scarlett tell you about today's drama? She said she was going to see a friend. I haven't seen her since breakfast." "Well, I'm sorry to tell you this, but I caught one of our wives in bed with a man in the guest room this morning. Initially, they claimed it was Scarlett, but when I said I would tell you, Scarlett backed down. They left everything to each other's conscience, trying to save themselves." "You must be joking," he yelled. "I'm not sure. I didn't open the garage, just saw a Mercedes. And no, I've never seen him before. Thanks for telling me, Vas. I'll look for her and see what she says. I'll let you know." "Thanks." Scene continued to cry on the stairs. "You shouldn't have told him. Don't you understand? You can't play like this while you're married and not suffer the consequences. If it was her, she needs to suffer. I don't understand how you could think you could say it was her and that you'd never tell Esteve. This would have never happened. We know you don't like Esteve, another reason I think you're playing with me. I can't believe you've done this to us. We have a baby. Little Vas started crying because of my shout, and Scene went to comfort him. I felt like crying, but I refused to shed tears in front of her. She was a wonderful mother. When we started dating, she admitted that she didn't care if I worked or not. She wanted to be a mother and have 3 children. She wasn't the type of person to have secret affairs. It wasn't in her nature. She was devoted to me and little Vas and never showed even a hint of unhappiness. I think the same was true for Scarlett. Although she was more sociable than Scene, if you had asked me, I wouldn't have believed she could do this to Esteve. The next morning, I called my father. "How are you, Sebastian? How's my grandson?" "Fine, Dad. Listen, I need your help. Everything's okay. I need to hire a private investigator." I explained what had happened. My parents had money and could afford to help me pay for a private detective. Plus, Scene managed our accounts, and I didn't want her to see the payment. My father went a step further and hired a private investigator to look into Scarlett as well. In his opinion, it was worth trying to save my marriage. "Sebastian," he said, "no matter what we discover or don't discover, your son should come first in every decision you make. You do understand that, right?" I sighed. "Yes, it's the only thing preventing me from divorcing her right now." "All right, son. You may have to swallow some pride and self-esteem. I know it's a tough choice, but it's part of what makes a man. No matter what anyone tells you, the child is the most important thing." "I know, Dad." I ended the conversation feeling worse than when it started. I sat at my desk and saw that Ben had already joined our morning call. I noticed she had put on makeup and chosen an outfit with a beautiful neckline. I wondered who the lucky person she was dressing up for was. I assumed she had a date after work. I joined the conversation and saw a message from Esteve on my phone. She said she wasn't at your house. I'm not sure if I should believe her, and I'll be mad if she lied. Good luck. Yeah, good luck. He was in the same situation as me. What should we believe in? Bet sent me an instant message with a question. Is everything okay? I looked at her and shook my head. No. She frowned, and we resumed our call. As soon as it ended, she asked, "Are you having lunch today? I'll treat you to cheer you up." I'm not the best company, Bet. Thanks for the offer anyway. Oh, I won't allow you to sink into misery. You don't deserve this. I didn't think I deserved a wife like her, but here I am. She shook her head and grumbled. Any woman who betrays you is stupid and doesn't deserve you. Thanks, Bet. The detective asked me to fill out some forms and a couple of questionnaires, and also to send him some photos. I spent my lunchtime on it, so I managed to avoid having lunch with Bet. I told Esteve about the private investigator, and he was excited. He filled in the parts of Scarlett's questionnaire that didn't have answers, her daily routine, and so on, and returned everything to the investigator to start working immediately. I hoped he could tell me quickly if it was Scarlett and not Scene. I knew I would go crazy every day if I didn't find out. He said it might take a couple of weeks to figure something out. I wondered why I hadn't heard anything about trashing the guy's car. I hoped to receive a call, at least from the insurance company, and worst-case scenario, from the police. I got home and saw that Scene had gone to swim classes with little Bas. So I messaged the detective that everything was ready for the installation of cameras. He came and went in less than half an hour, and I made dinner for myself. When Scene got home, I asked her, "Who was that guy?" "What guy?" "The guy you were with." "Don't pretend." I told you it wasn't me. I have no idea who you were dating. I called Scarlett and put her on speaker. Hi, Vass. Who was that guy? The guy you found in your guest room. I have no idea. One of you is lying, and I'm going to find out who. I hoped one of them would let slip some information, no matter how insignificant. It didn't matter. A private detective knew about the car damage and checked the body shops in town. He would find out soon enough. A week went by. There was no news from the private detective. Nothing changed in my situation, and Scene did everything she could to show me she loved me. Bas was becoming obsessive, inviting me to lunch every day. I realized what she was doing and put an end to it. She would have to wait for me to divorce before she could claim me. One morning, I passed by Starbucks and was quite surprised. I was in a drive-through line around the coffee shop, and someone walked in front of my car to enter the store. It was that guy. I'll never forget that face. I left the line and parked. I stood behind my car and waited. After a few minutes, he came out, and he didn't notice me until he was about 10 feet away. "Hello," I said. "Do you remember me?" "Listen, man, I don't want any trouble. She didn't tell me she was married." I approached him and said, "Answer a question, and I'll let you go, and you'll never see me again, okay, buddy?" "Ask." "Who did you sleep with?" "What are you talking about?" he asked. "You saw us." "Who was she?" I shouted. "What was her name?" "I don't know her name. We met online. On a forum. I called her the Siren." "Ah," and he flinched as if I were going to hit him. I took a deep breath and asked, "What's her phone number?" "I don't have a phone number. We communicate through private messages on the site." It was getting harder and harder not to hit him out of frustration. "What kind of website is that?" I asked. "It's a community. She posts pictures there, some of them are nude, and others in lingerie." We corresponded only once after that. She promised to pay for my car repair, and I told her I didn't want to hear from her anymore. "I don't want any trouble, man. You better not get near her, or we'll meet again. Understand?" "Yes, please." I swear I didn't know she was married. He walked away, and I realized he was telling the truth. The most interesting part of that conversation was that he said she posted the photos. She may not have a name, but I have photos. I hope at least one of them shows her hands. I went to the forum page and called in sick to work so they wouldn't catch me looking at naked women all morning. It wasn't hard to figure out, and soon I had my own username and joined the community. I was looking at pictures of attractive and not so attractive women, most of them cropping their faces. I found the Siren's post, and it was a common image in lingerie. I couldn't see her hands, but I didn't recognize the clothing, and for the first time in a week, I felt better. I clicked on the username and went to the Siren's page. There were photos, and I didn't recognize the room. They weren't taken in either of our houses. She must have been holding the camera with her hand with the mole because it wasn't in any of the photos. After going through dozens more photos, I started to get frustrated. I tried to identify the room, the clothing, any trace on her body. Even her lips resembled signs. I was baffled. The photos were at most 6 months old, so the timeline didn't help either. Sign had already lost weight after the pregnancy by that time and had no stretch marks or scars. Another dead end, and I was going crazy. I was so close to figuring out which of the sisters it was, and then I had a revelation. I went into the house. Sign was feeding my son. She asked, "Is everything okay, Vass? Are you feeling all right?" "I'm fine. Could you make me some soup?" "Sure, honey. Sit down, it'll be ready in a minute." I saw her phone on the table and sent a private message to the Siren's user. I left the phone and waited. It was heartbreaking. Sigh looked at me and asked, Vas. I don't want to pressure you, but you're close to making a decision. I'm slowly dying every day without your love. I was about to tell her that I still loved her when my phone vibrated. I opened it and saw a message from the sirens. I broke down and cried like a baby, and Sigh ran to me and hugged me. What's wrong, Vas? What's happening? I love you so much, Sigh. I would have died if it was you. What are you talking about? I told her about my morning and showed her the photos. She looked at them and laughed. You're silly, but you're mine, Vas. What do you mean, honey? You said you couldn't find any differences between me and these photos. You overlooked a big difference. I looked at the one on my phone and examined it closely. I'm sorry, I just can't see it. I said, feeling stupid. Oh, honey, look. She took off her yoga pants and underwear, and I started to laugh. I can't believe how stupid I am. It was all in vain, I said, laughing. I kissed her and asked, is it bedtime already? She smiled and replied, oh, yes. I'll see you in the bedroom. Sigh had a small sun-shaped tattoo on her thigh that I didn't notice right away. However, not all our problems were resolved. While Scarlett didn't prevail, she allowed Scarlett to use our house, tried to justify it, and find excuses, but I didn't believe her. A few weeks later, I received a report from the private investigator saying that Scarlett had been dating several men in hotels. I gave the information to Esteve, and he kicked her out. I told Sigh that she needed to cut all contact with Scarlett, and she reluctantly agreed. She was already angry with her sister and didn't want to talk to her because of her lies, both to me and to Esteve, but she decided they would eventually reconcile. I didn't believe it. I told her that if I found out she was communicating with her sister, I would kick her out. It may seem harsh to some, but I believe it's the only way to protect myself. I talked to a lawyer about a postnuptial agreement, but my main concern was little Bas, and in my state, custody cannot be included in a postnuptial agreement. As a result, I forced her to sign an agreement that gave me most of the assets and left her without alimony if she had an affair. She signed it without hesitation. Story 2. I'm a 31-year-old guy, and I've been in a relationship with my soon-to-be ex-wife, who's 28, for 7 years. We were married for 5 of those years. We both had jobs that made us think kids weren't in our plans, but we had so many other amazing plans for our future. Throughout the 7 years we were together, we never had any disagreements about the direction we wanted to take or the goals we had for our future. So, back in February, my wife started a new job, and that's when she met this guy, her coworker, who's 38 years old. After her 2-week training, she came home, and I noticed that she was chatting a lot with this guy. I've never been a jealous person, and I understand that our industry is male-dominated, so she's often surrounded by guys. I always trusted her and never questioned her loyalty or boundaries. However, I couldn't help but notice that she was texting this guy a lot in March. I brought it up twice, expressing my concerns, but she reassured me that he's just a friend, and I shouldn't worry. They had common interests like being Christians, and they chatted a lot about the Bible. I'm not religious. She even said that she would stop talking to him if I felt uncomfortable, but I knew they were going for training together again at the end of March. I realized it would be impossible to stop her from talking to him. So I didn't push the issue further. I always made sure to check in with my wife to see if she was happy in our marriage or if there was anything I could do to improve things. I never received any negative feedback from her, and even as recently as mid-March, she was telling me that I was the best thing that ever happened to her. However, things took a turn when she left for a month of job training in a different location at the end of March and the first few days. Everything seemed normal between us, but as the week progressed, we started to fight a lot. I'll admit some of it was my fault because I was going through some personal stuff and was feeling quite emotional, but there was something else bothering me too. She seemed distant and expressed some strange ideas about the future that didn't sound like her at all. This made me feel uneasy because we used to hardly ever argue about anything. I can't even remember the last time we had a big fight before April. It's been a confusing and challenging time for both of us. I felt really bad about arguing with her because I knew how important it was for her. The main issue we were fighting about was her not maintaining clear boundaries with this guy from work, and it was obvious to me that he was interested in her romantically. Then she brought up the need for space and time to think about our relationship and our future. She assured me that she still loved me, but things weren't the same anymore. I was confused, but I respected her request for space because I didn't fully understand what was going on after a couple of days. She dropped the bombshell of divorce during a FaceTime conversation. It was devastating, and at that moment, I still didn't have a clear grasp of the situation, but deep down, I had a gut feeling that she might be leaving with this other guy. It's been a roller coaster of emotions and uncertainty for me when she finally returned home in mid-May. I went to the airport to pick her up. As soon as I saw her, something fell off. She didn't even give me a hug after not seeing each other for a month and a half. When we got home, she didn't bother unpacking her luggage that first night. She looked me in the eyes and told me directly that she wanted a divorce and that she no longer loved me. It was incredibly tough and hurtful, but I was still holding on to the hope that maybe our arguments and my emotional ups and downs had contributed to her feelings, so I tried to work things out, but the very next day, she started acting differently. She claimed she wanted to clean the house and create nice memories for the last couple of days before she left. I sensed something wasn't right, and I felt like she was hiding things from me. So, for the first time in 7 years, I went through her phone. There, I discovered that even before she came back home, she was already in a relationship with that coworker guy, and they had even signed a lease to move in together. This was just a month and a half after she had left home at the end of March. She had told this guy that she was willing to give up everything to start anew with him. It was a devastating revelation, and it left me feeling even more hurt and confused. I still feel terrible to this day for going through her phone because it's something I had never done in our relationship before, and I felt like I had crossed a line. However, at that moment, I decided to take screenshots of her conversations with the coworker and acted like nothing happened just to see how far she would go with all the lies she had been telling me. For the following days, I kept asking her questions about her and this coworker, but I never got any honest answers. Finally, that night when we were talking, I got really frustrated and angry, and I started pressing her for the truth. She turned it around and blamed me for my own issues, saying that's why we could never be together. Even during our heated arguments, she continued to lie. Eventually, she decided to leave that night, and as soon as she was gone, I sent her all the screenshots I had taken and told her that I already knew everything. I admitted that I was testing her to see how far she would go with her deception. She then claimed that they only started their relationship after she brought up divorce, so she argued that it wasn't cheating. She also said that she had been wanting out of the relationship for a long time but was just waiting for the right moment because she perceived me as controlling and abusive. Seeing her leave and knowing it might be the last time I see her was one of the hardest moments in my life. I kept asking her to be honest with me and show some respect for our marriage. Until the very end, she had been an amazing wife for 7 years, and it's tough for me to understand how she could change so drastically in such a short period of time. I'm still left with a lot of confusion and questions. After she moved out, I didn't waste any time and hired a lawyer to file for divorce. She didn't want any of the belongings I got her, the house, the cars, or any financial support. She just wanted to end things. It's not a decision I wanted to make, but I couldn't risk her changing her mind, so I went ahead with the divorce process. I already have the signed paperwork back, so it's in progress now. It's been a tough journey, but I'm trying to stay strong and move forward. I wanted to make sure she learned a valuable lesson before I walked away for good. What she did was hurtful, and I was feeling really upset, so I decided to act without causing any harm to my own character. I gathered all the screenshots of her conversations with her coworker and put them into a PDF. Then I sent it to their boss. My hope was that this would help them understand the consequences of their actions and treat others with more respect in the future. And just like that, both of them got fired from the company. A perfect way to start their love story. Even though I'm still hurt by her cheating, I didn't want to stoop to her level and ruin my own reputation in the process. It's been 2 months since she told me she wanted a divorce, and I'm happy to say that I'm doing a lot better now. My soon-to-be ex has been trying to contact me, begging for mercy. She told me she's been having trouble finding a job since, and the guy she moved in with is having second thoughts on breaking up with her since he lost his job because of her. If she thinks I will help her in any way, then she's absolutely nuts. During this time, I've been trying to focus on myself and work towards building a new life and becoming a better person. I understand that neither of us was perfect, nor our relationship had its flaws, but what hurt me the most was how quickly everything changed. In less than 2 months, she went from being in a marriage to being in a new relationship and now living together with this person. It's been hard to grasp how all the memories we shared, the things we built together, and the plans we have for the future could seemingly vanish overnight because of someone new in her life. However, I've come to realize that dwelling on the past won't help me move forward. Instead, I want to focus on the positive aspects of my life and the opportunities that lie ahead. I'm learning to accept that some things are beyond my control, and I'm determined to create a bright future for myself. I believe that as time goes on, I'll heal and new adventures and joys will come my way. OP, I am truly sorry to hear what you've been through. It must have been incredibly difficult to see your ex-wife drop everything for her coworker and leave your marriage behind. It's hard to believe how quickly things can change, especially when you had so many beautiful memories and plans together for the future. I can only imagine how hurtful and confusing this experience must have been for you. It's not easy to come to terms with such a drastic change in someone you once shared your life with, but now it's essential to focus on healing and moving forward from the past. Remember that it's okay to feel upset and heartbroken, but don't let these emotions hold you back from embracing the future. Take the time you need to process everything, but also remember that you have the strength to build a new and fulfilling life for yourself. Surround yourself with supportive friends and family, engage in activities that bring you joy, and explore new opportunities. The healing process may take time, but as you move forward, you'll find that life has so much more in store for you. Take this as an opportunity to grow and discover new aspects of yourself. You deserve happiness and a bright future, and I truly hope you find it. Remember, you are not defined by your past, and you have the power to create a beautiful and fulfilling life ahead. Wishing you all the best on your journey of healing and moving on. Story 3. So, before my girlfriend, 31, female, and I, 28, male, officially started dating, we were actually best friends for a good 10 years. We were part of the same friend group and practically spent every single weekend together and even more than that. However, we never dated initially because she used to be in a relationship with one of my best friends when they were younger, and I thought it wouldn't be a good idea to pursue anything back then. Fast forward a few years, she broke up with my best friend and began dating someone else while I also got into my own relationship. Eventually, both of our relationships ended about 2.5 years ago, and that's when things got a bit complicated. We supported each other through our breakups and ended up hooking up after spending time together. As time passed, I developed stronger feelings for her and decided to take the plunge and ask her out on a proper date. However, she wasn't sure if she was ready for a new relationship. Despite telling me she had cut off all contact with her ex-boyfriend, I must admit I got a bit persistent and eventually convinced her to give it a shot, and that's how we officially started dating. In the beginning of our dating, I had a conversation with my girlfriend about her ex-boyfriend. I wanted her to know that I was okay with her being friends with him if she wanted to, as long as she was open and honest about it. I understood that they had spent a significant part of their 20s together, lived together, and had plans to get married, so I asked her to let me know if they ever reconnected in a significant way. I also suggested that she inform him about our relationship so there would be no confusion and their interaction would remain platonic. After a couple of months, I discovered that she was texting her ex, and this bothered me. We had a serious conversation about it, and she admitted that she didn't tell me because she wasn't sure why she did it either. I told her that I valued honesty and asked her to be truthful with me if it was innocent texting. I assured her that I could forgive her. To resolve the issue, I asked her to text him right then and there to let him know about our relationship. We managed to make up after that incident, but the problem was that her ex would still come up in conversations occasionally. Even when she was drunk, she would admit to missing him and feeling like he hated her because he never responded. I began to feel guilty, thinking I might have handled the situation poorly by cutting her off from someone in an unhealthy way. A few days ago, something happened that made me suspicious about my girlfriend's behavior, and it had been bothering me for a while. She was always very protective of her phone, and whenever I needed to use it for something simple like directions, she would get defensive. So when she fell asleep while we were both drunk, I made a regrettable decision to go through her phone. To my shock, I discovered that she had been living a double life behind my back. She was seeing her ex-boyfriend regularly, even on days when she wouldn't meet me. He knew all the things about her life that she had kept hidden from me, and I was completely in the dark about their relationship too. The situation had become so convoluted that he believed she was living with her mom, but she was actually living in an apartment with her sister, where I would often see her. Her sister, who I was also close friends with, was aware of everything that was going on, and to some extent, even her mom knew about it. The lies she told were constant, detailed, and carefully planned, deceiving both me and the other guy. It was a shocking revelation and left me feeling betrayed and hurt. Once I found out, I made her confront everything, and it all just blew up after that. It was a difficult conversation, and things quickly got out of hand. The revelation shocked our entire friend group, leaving everyone in disbelief and causing chaos among us. To add to the mess, her sister advised her to cut me off, while my friend suggested I do the same to her. As I confronted her, she tried to beg and plead for me to stay, claiming she didn't want to lose me. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal and hurt. It's hard to fathom that the person I knew and loved for over 10 years could be capable of such deceit and lies. I mean, how could someone carry on with this charade, fooling me and leading a secret life for so long? It's like my reality has been shattered, and I'm struggling to make sense of it all. I trusted her completely, and now I question everything about our relationship. The fact that she could lie consistently day in and day out makes me wonder if I ever really knew her at all. As time went on, news of my ex-girlfriend's actions reached the so-called ex-boyfriend she had been seen with while we were still together. He was totally shocked and hurt when he found out about her deceit and the web of lies she had woven to keep both relationships going. He had genuinely been trying to rekindle their old romance, thinking she was single and living with her mom. He had no clue she was with me, living in a completely different place. When he confronted her about the situation, it turned into a heated argument, and he called her a gold digger and a good-for-nothing cheater, and he too left. She lost not one but 2 relationships because she was being too immature, but it didn't stop there. Karma seemed to catch up with my ex-girlfriend in the following days. Her double life started to fall apart, and the truth came out. Her lies and betrayal not only destroyed our relationships but also shattered the trust within her friend group. People were understandably upset and disappointed, feeling like they had been deceived too. As the truth became public knowledge, many people distanced themselves from her. Her deceit had a profound impact, and it was tough for people to trust her again. The charm that once drew people to her now worked against her as they realized it had often been a facade hiding her true intentions. The process of moving on was gradual, but I surrounded myself with loved ones who reminded me of my worth and helped me see a brighter future ahead. Surprisingly, I haven't heard from my ex-girlfriend since the confrontation. It was as if she'd vanished from my life, and I must admit it brought a sense of relief. I was able to distance myself from the pain and confusion, and it allowed me to focus on rebuilding my life. Not only did I distance myself from her, but my friends also chose to cut ties with her. It was a difficult choice for them too, but they stood by my side and supported my decision to move forward. Having them as a solid support system during this tough time made a world of difference that I reflect on the past and the lessons learned. I realized that I deserve someone who values honesty, trust, and respect as much as I do. Going through this experience helped me grow as an individual and understand what I truly want in a partner. It taught me that it's crucial to set boundaries and prioritize my own well-being. Now I can confidently say that I am in a better place emotionally and mentally. I've been focusing on my personal growth, pursuing my passions, and meeting new people who bring positivity into my life. While the healing process took time, I am grateful for the strength it gave me to move forward. Though the experience was challenging, it ultimately led me to a happier and healthier state of mind. I've learned to value myself and trust my instincts. Today, I am more hopeful about the future and open to the possibility of finding someone who will cherish and respect me for who I am. It's truly disheartening to think that someone who was your best friend for a whole decade could still betray your trust like that. I can't imagine how hurt and betrayed you must have felt when you discovered the truth about her double life. But I'm glad to see that you found the strength to move on and prioritize your own well-being. You absolutely deserve better than someone who would deceive you and lead a secret life behind your back. It's incredible to see how you've grown through this challenging experience. It takes a lot of courage to step away from a long-term relationship and focus on healing yourself. I admire your resilience and your willingness to surround yourself with supportive friends who have your back. Story 4. I, a 33-year-old male, met my wife, a 31-year-old female, 8 years ago on a dating app. At the time, neither of us was looking for anything serious. We were both young and wanted to make the best of our youth. But then we fell for each other, and all of that went out the window. We wanted to be with each other all the time, and things quickly got serious. I knew before she and I even met that my wife was polyamorous. At the time, it wasn't something I cared much about. I just went into our relationship thinking it was going to be a casual, fun time. I was definitely curious about what that was and how that worked in her life. But personally, I've always been monogamous. My wife told me one day, when things started to get serious, that for the first time in years, she was only thinking about one person, and that was me. There was a bit of a disconnect between us when we first started exclusively dating because I felt like I was taking something away from her through monogamy. However, she assured me that it was what she wanted. We had some ups and downs, but we were able to work it out to be together. Eventually, I proposed to her, and we got married. Some of the people in my family were not at all understanding of polyamory, and they were practically betting that I would end up getting divorced before I was with my wife. I didn't know much about it, and I might have thought the same thing, but she explained everything to me in such a way that I understood what it was, and I trusted that should she ever have any issues with monogamy, she would come to me, and we could talk about them. About 3 years into our marriage, I got the opportunity of a lifetime for work. It required me to travel abroad for 3 months to do some on-site filming for an advertising agency. They were pretty much paying me to travel all over Asia, visit some of the best tourist sites, and take pictures, all expenses paid, including hotels, meals, and airfare, everything you can think of. After a long discussion with my wife, we decided that it was too good of an opportunity to pass up, and I agreed to take it. Of course, that meant that she would be alone back home while I was away, except for 1 week when she would be meeting me in Tokyo. Since our schedules aligned, I said goodbye to her and set off on my grand adventure. I had a great time. Every night, I would FaceTime with my wife, and we would catch up. I had no fears that anything was going to happen while I was away. One night, I called her for FaceTime around 5 p.m. while I was in Thailand, which was around 8 a.m. in our time zone. Our typical call schedule had been just like that. I would call her in the evening when I got finished with all of my things, and she was usually drinking coffee in the kitchen when I did. However, this time she didn't answer at first. I figured that she must have slept late or forgotten to set her alarm, but deep down, I knew that was not like her at all. She had always been the kind of person to wake up at 7 a.m. on the dot without even needing an alarm to do so. Still, I didn't suspect that she was with someone else. I just texted her and told her that I missed her and loved her, and I would give her a call the next morning since we would both be busy and/or asleep. When I was finally able to get on the phone with her again, I asked her about what happened. It wasn't an accusatory question. It was more out of curiosity since it just wasn't like her. She got defensive with her answer and made it sound like I was insinuating something when I wasn't by any means. I ended the call before an argument started. That was the last thing I wanted while I was trying to enjoy myself. But I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more to her reaction that I didn't know about. Eventually, we made up, and everything was fine leading up to her visiting me in Tokyo. She got off the plane, and I was at the airport to pick her up. I was excited to see her. She was my wife, and I loved her and missed her. It had only been 2 weeks since I last saw her, but the first thing I wanted to do was just go back to the hotel room and be intimate with her. When we got there, she told me she wasn't in the mood because she was a little bit jet-lagged from the flight. I completely understood where she was coming from, so I didn't want to pressure her into doing anything. So we both just lay down and talked for a while. Throughout the rest of the week, every time I would try to initiate something with her, she would come up with a reason to reject it. Whenever she would reject it, I wouldn't ask any questions or try to pressure her to give me answers about why she didn't want to sleep with me. It did strike me as odd because she had always been the type of person who was very eager to have intimacy. The Tokyo trip ended for her, and I still had 1 week left on my journey. It flew by, and I couldn't wait to get home because I could feel that there was some distance growing between my wife and me. Everything seemed normal when I got there, but she still wasn't wanting to sleep with me. After the first couple of days, I was back. She started staying late at work, and it honestly felt like she was actively avoiding me at that point. I had let a lot of my insecurities about what was going on with our relationship pile up, and I confronted her about it when she returned home. She told me that I was being obnoxious with my accusations. In fact, she ended up guilt-tripping me for why she was staying late at work. She told me it was because she had to take time off work to visit me in Tokyo, as I pressured her to do. We got into a huge argument about that, and I ended up sleeping on the couch. The following day, which happened to be a Saturday, she told me she had to go to work for some last-minute troubleshooting at the office. In all the time we had been together, she had never worked on a Saturday. I think it was at that point that I really thought something was going on. All the time that we had been together, we had never had any issues with her polyamory. But as soon as I started to think that something was wrong, it popped its head right up. I couldn't help but wonder if she had taken advantage of the time that I was gone and slept with another person. For a while, I convinced myself that I was just exaggerating and purposefully trying to hurt my feelings by thinking things like that. I distracted myself by trying to clean up some of the house. As I was looking under our bed to pull out any old clothes or trash, I found a sock. It was only one sock, but it wasn't mine. I knew that, and it wasn't the type of sock that my wife wore. It was someone else's sock who didn't live in my house. That was the push that I needed to seriously consider that my wife was, in fact, cheating on me. I went to her office and looked through her desktop to see if there were any indications of who it was with or what she was doing while she was supposedly at work. There was no indication from any of her recent emails that she needed to go into the office for any reason, so that helped me realize that she had already lied to me. Her inbox seemed clean, but when I looked over her desktop and clicked on her recycle bin, I found some pictures and videos that she had deleted but hadn't cleared them. My heart completely sank when I saw that. I recognized the man in the pictures right away. He was one of her coworkers. I had met him a few times at company gatherings, and I always thought he was a bit chummy with my wife. I would make jokes about it with her, and she would just laugh it off with me and tell me that he was married too, so I had nothing to worry about. I guess they both saw a prime opportunity to cheat on their partners while I was out of town. I emailed myself the evidence and immediately began looking for a divorce attorney. Right away, I started thinking of a way to get back at both of them for their betrayal. Knowing that my wife was cheating on me with one thing, but the fact that she was cheating on me with a married man and ruining 2 relationships knowingly was like a slap in the face. I looked her coworker up on social media and found his wife pretty easily. I sent her a message asking if we could set up a time to speak face to face since I had some news to share about her husband. She probably assumed the worst right away, but she agreed to meet me at a cafe. I saw her world crumbling when I told her, and I felt terrible. I felt the exact same way. I didn't want to let either of them just get away with their affair when they ruined both of our lives. I needed to come up with some way to get back at them. I spent the next few weeks pretending like everything was all right with my wife, and I encouraged the partner of her coworker to do the same. We both planned on leaving our spouses, but we wanted to get everything in order first. Both of us were going to surprise them with our divorce papers on the same day so neither of them would have time to prepare. When everything was done, I brought my wife out to a lovely restaurant. She thought I was surprising her with a nice date. Toward the end of the meal, she asked me what prompted the gesture, so I figured I might as well tell her. I pulled out the papers and slid them across the table to her. She was shocked and hysterical. She tried to contain herself, but it really was quite the scene. Other diners were watching us while she started crying. I explained why and told her I saw the pictures, and I wasn't going to be with a cheater. She tried to tell me I was misinterpreting them and that she hadn't cheated, but I didn't believe it. I just left the restaurant, leaving her to pick up the bill. We got divorced, and now we're living separately and have no contact with each other at all. Funnily enough, her coworker's wife actually messaged me one day and asked to get together. We kind of hit it off. Things are still complicated because the wounds are so fresh, but there could be something there. OP, I'm so sorry you had to go through all of that. It isn't unheard of for a polyamorous person to agree to monogamy when they fall for a certain person, but not everyone adjusts to that lifestyle. If she was so quick to take advantage of the opportunity when you were out of town, it makes me wonder if it was the first time or not. You did the right thing by telling the affair partner's spouse. She had the right to know that her husband was cheating as well. I'm glad you feel like you're building another connection with someone, but I would be careful not to jump into something else so fast, especially with someone who just went through the same thing. You could form some kind of trauma bond, and that would be toxic. Story 5. When I was 27 years old, I met my fiancée, a 25-year-old female, 4 years ago. I knew right away that I wanted to spend the rest of my life with her. She was everything that I had been looking for. We'd only been dating for a year when I proposed, and we've been engaged for 3 years. The long engagement has caused some trouble for us. One of the biggest issues is that she wanted to plan her dream wedding, which subsequently would cost us quite a bit of money. I've never been one to care about superficial things like that. I would be more than happy going to the courthouse, signing some papers, and then spending all of the wedding money on our honeymoon. However, she had always dreamed of her big day, and she wanted a big wedding with no compromise. It felt like every other week, the budget we set aside for the wedding had increased, and she was telling me that she had gone over and was apologizing for it. At some point, I noticed that her apologies were meaningless because she continued to go over. We were getting into a lot of arguments, and there was a bit of resentment brewing between us. I'd had enough of her constant disregard for the financial constraints of the wedding, so I sat her down intending to have a calm, reasonable conversation with her. She was immediately very defensive and told me that she wasn't sure if she could be with someone who was controlling. I was upset that she had accused me of being controlling when all I was doing was standing up for myself when she was taking advantage of me. After the fight, she ended up leaving and staying at her friend's house for a week while we figured things out. Honestly, I thought it might have been the end for us. I was heartbroken. She was my dream girl, and I cared so much about her. She eventually came back, and we had a long discussion about the wedding. We both agreed that we still wanted to be together but needed to set some boundaries. We also agreed that we would move forward with what we had for the wedding and halt all further planning. That was the only compromise on the issue I would allow, since we were already over budget by 50%, and we had 150 people invited. We fell back into our old patterns with each other, and it seemed like our temporary break and discussion actually helped our relationship. The wedding was only a few months away, and we were doing well. As we got closer to the wedding date, some of the stressors started to come back for us. My fiancée's coping mechanism with the stress was to throw herself into her work. She's a graphic designer and very creatively inclined, so it helped alleviate the stress. So instead of being home with me, she was at work. She started spending more and more time at work, which felt odd and unlike her. I was curious about why she was there so much, so I asked her one night when she came home. She just told me that it was a good way to escape and forget about all of it. I didn't understand why she still wanted to go through with a huge wedding if it was stressing her out so much, but I didn't ask about that. Around the same time, I noticed that she was wearing more makeup and more revealing clothes to work. I had nothing against her dressing in a way that made her feel confident, but she normally wore long pants, boots, and sweaters to work because she was always complaining about how cold she was while she was there. Suddenly, she was wearing sleeveless blouses showing cleavage and skirts. It was odd, but I tried not to worry about it. Honestly, I've seen a ton of those Am I the Jerk? Videos and stories exposing cheaters, so a lot of the things she was doing were raising red flags for me. I needed to find out if something was going on before the wedding. I didn't want to be married to her and then find out she was with an ex or something after we were legally attached. I did some snooping on my own but didn't find anything. One thing I've always known about liars is that they're good at hiding their lies, so I justified hiring a private investigator to follow her. I reached out to someone who specializes in infidelity and they agreed to take the case. I could only afford to pay them for a few days because the wedding was depleting a lot of my savings. The first day, they didn't find anything. She went to work and went home with no issue. I thought that maybe I was overreacting, but my gut told me not to call the private investigator off. The next day, I was glad I trusted my gut. My fiancée texted me about midway through the day that she would be staying late at the office. She said that she was helping a coworker with some excess work they had before a due date. However, the evidence the private investigator brought back to me told a different story. They emailed me a file with videos and pictures of my girlfriend with her boss in his office, having sex right on his desk while other employees were in the office. I just remember staring at the computer screen until it turned itself off. I was so shocked by what I saw. When I collected myself, I started to think about my options. There was absolutely no chance I was going through with the wedding, but I needed to figure out how to end it. I wanted a little revenge on her for cheating on me, and an idea hit me. So, before I acted on it, I packed up some of my stuff and texted my brother to see if I could stay with him. When I got to his house, I drafted an email to our entire wedding guest list. In the email, I told them all that it was cancelled and attached the evidence of my fiancée's affair. Surprisingly, I got several responses back from relatives, coworkers, and friends about it. What surprised me the most, which I didn't even realize at the time, was that my fiancée's HR manager was on the list. She reached out to me and asked for details because it was something she was obligated to act on since it was clearly on company property. I told her everything I knew about him while my fiancée figured out I was with my brother and came to his house, banging on the door. She was fuming at me, but I stood my ground and ended it. I told her I was contacting the venue, vendors, and everyone else involved in the wedding and having all of my money refunded to me. I felt bad when she was crying in front of me, but then I remembered how she cheated on me, and I didn't anymore. She and her boss were both fired for their inappropriate relations on the job. She tried to call me and tell me that I was still obligated to pay for the apartment, even though I didn't live there, but I managed to work something out with the apartment complex to pay for 1 month and get off the lease. I think they were just willing to work with me because of the situation. Them why now ex-fiancée was forced to move out because she lost her job and couldn't afford rent on her own, having dumped what little she had in savings into a wedding that never happened. OP, I'm sorry you had to go through something like that. It sounds like your ex was manipulating you from the start when she wasn't respecting your budget for the wedding. I'm not saying you were wrong for following your heart and proposing so early, but it's usually best to spend some time with someone before proposing to avoid situations like that. People tend to hide their less desirable qualities early on. I'm glad you were able to get out of the relationship and your lease so you didn't end up marrying her. You saved yourself a lot of stress by avoiding the inevitable divorce. I wish you the best moving forward.